All right, it is now 9:32, and we will open this meeting in Yamhill County Transit Area Board of Directors. First order of business is consideration of approval of the minutes from February 15th, 2018. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a recommendation that we approve the minutes of the February 15, 2018 meeting.
Very good. It has been moved that we approve the minutes from our February 15th meeting. Do I have any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Let the record show that Commissioner Olson, Commissioner Starrett, and Commissioner Primzich all voted in the affirmative. Moving on to our agenda item. The first item is consideration of Free Fair Day proposal effective August 6th, 2018. And do you want to come forward and just give us a brief analysis of that, please? And the significance of the date?
Yes. So as you've seen from the memo that I provided, we would like to propose that annually we have a Free Fair Day and a Customer Appreciation Day, also recognition of people who contributed to the transit system. This sort of was, the idea came about after one of our members of the STF committee, Mark Schiffmacher, passed away in January, and we were thinking, how could we, honor him and others who have contributed to the transit system? So we thought this would be a nice way that we could do that, is annually have a Free Fair Day and also have, tell people who ride the system in the community through press releases and other ways what, others have done to support it. August 6th happens to be Mark's birthday, and so we thought, well, that'd be a good day, and it's a good day going forward because summer's a nice time to do these kind of events. So we'll probably have, this year we'll recognize Mark and possibly a couple others. We haven't finalized that yet. And, we'll provide some nice, maybe some cookies and coffee at the transit center for the riders. And we'd like to have that go on annually going forward.
Okay. So as I understand it, the purpose of doing it as an annual event at this time reduces the necessity to come back to the board for an approval. So do I hear a motion?
So moved.
It's been moved that we move forward with a Free Fair Day on an annual basis, starting with this year being August 6th. Are we intending that that would be the date of this every year? Okay, so the proposal is that on August 6th of each year moving forward, we would have...
Take that back. What day is, doesn't it have a calendar? What day is August 6th fall on?
Oh.
We were thinking, we can't necessarily say August 6th because it will end up being on a Sunday sometime. So I think it will, in going forward...
The first Monday
of
August. Okay.
So we'll want that worded in the...
Accordingly.
In
Okay.
the board order, first Monday of August.
So we would amend the motion to reflect that, if that is okay with Commissioner Starrett, who made the motion.
Yes.
So the motion then would state that on the first Monday of each August, the transit system would have a Free Fair Day to celebrate the community's participation in our program and the people who have made it the strong program that it is.
Commissioner, could we call it a Remarkable Rider Day?
Yes, I meant to say that. Thank you, Laura. We were going to name it Remarkable Rider, and the mark is capitalized.
Oh, okay.
And that was actually, I don't know who came up with it, but they had it at his memorial service in his bio. So marks that they came in. I asked his wife if that was okay for us to use it. And sadly, I should mention, his wife passed away. So just when I went to go talk to her about this whole idea, she was not doing well, and then her sister was there, and we heard about it a couple of weeks ago that she actually, I didn't realize she was that ill.
About 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if I might do some wordsmithing on your motion. It is going to be on the first Monday of each year. We will have Remarkable Writer Appreciation Day.
Each August,
I'm sorry,
each August
each August. Didn't I say that?
year.
Would you make a motion, please?
No, I'm going to let you do it.
If I may.
August, first Monday in August, in each of the ensuing years, we will have Remarkable Writer Appreciation Day for Yamhill County Transit Authority, where we will have free fare for all of our regular writers, and also anybody who wants to try to do it. And so I have the motion, and we will clean it up a little bit, but all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Let the record show. Commissioner Olson, Commissioner Sterrett, Commissioner Primasic voted in the affirmative, and we now have a free fare day. The next thing on our agenda is consideration of an agreement between Yamhill County Transit Area and CTS Software for the purpose of new demand response scheduling software in the amount of $30,140. This is something we discussed at our informal. Do you have anything further to bring before us on that?
No, not really. Just if there's anything I need to put into the public record.
The only thing we discussed on Tuesday, Mr. Chair, was that we would ask that this be approved by the board, subject to the final review and approval of district council.
Okay. So the motion is that we would approve this subject to the final approval of county council as they review the contract and make certain that everything is in accord. Do I have any further discussion?
The only discussion I have, Mr. Chair, is that I did have some questions for First Transit and Cynthia Tuesday. My questions were adequately answered, so I think we can move forward. My only other question is did we actually, I just might have missed it, but did we actually do a motion yet? I don't think we did a motion yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. I'm sorry. I went to
Also
the
move.
discussion before the motion. Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Commissioner Olson has moved approval. Any further discussion beyond that? Okay. Hearing none then, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, let the record show Commissioner Olson, Commissioner Sterrett, Commissioner Primasic voted in the affirmative. The next thing on our agenda is consideration of the purchase of one used bus from Woodburn Transit in the amount of $1,500 for the purpose of a fill-in and a special events bus.
And just so you know, I've sort of just moved ahead. I don't remember if I had shared this with you or not, but I think we're going to use that bus in the UFO festival. So we're actually going to paint it and have it look fun, UFO-y. So not spending a lot of money, but just because it's all white and sort of looks a little utilitarian right now. So we thought if we use it for that purpose, it'll be kind of a nice thing. Not that we could use it in other places next to it. It'll have our logo and things like that on it. So we're trying to see if we can get it in the parade, as well as we're going to be doing, we used to provide routes for the UFO festival, but we're going to be doing a shuttle from the parking lot. I think it's going to be the fairgrounds. We haven't finalized that yet. So we'll probably be doing parking shuttle with it, and then if it can be in the fair, we'll have it in the fair as well.
Cynthia, have you given much thought to maybe having, I know we're on summer, so it may be too late, of having kind of either college or high school students?
That's what I wanted to do, but we
painting on it?
only have 3 weeks.
And-
The UFO is, so it's actually a young person who did the mural on 3rd and Cowles. The mural there that I think the Midville Downtown Association hired her to do that. So we got in touch with her. We just met with her yesterday, and she thinks she can do it in time. So we've just made all arrangements with the fair. It's parked at the fairgrounds right now. They're going to just use one of their slots, and she's gonna do it. And we're gonna do it in the theme of space, celestial planets, that sort of thing. So it'll be kind of. But if we decide, we don't like that, and we want to end up including it in the bus graphic upgrade, we can do that as well. So.
Okay. Do I hear a motion?
I have a motion to approve item 4, consideration of the purchase of one used bus from Woodburn Transit in the amount of $1,500.
We have a motion on the floor to approve this item 4 on our agenda. Do I hear any further discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would only ask unless the board would like this to come back before them at this dollar value, the contract normally would not need to. So if you are comfortable approving the purchase and not having this come back before the board, then I would ask that you again approve this subject to the final review and approval of District Council.
Okay. So with the caveat that the county council has added, is that okay with everybody? Okay. So I would ask for a vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, let the record show that Commissioner Olson, Commissioner Sterrett, and Commissioner Primzich all voted in the affirmative. So we will have a special events bus. Is there any other business you'd like to bring before the board? Oh, yes, Laura.
Directors, just a reminder, on Tuesday you discussed the purchase of 4 buses. It's not on your agenda today because there will be no action until the purchase paperwork and contracts come before you. But on the Board of Commissioners meeting today, you will have an action item to consider for the transfer of the funds to the transit budget.
Okay.
Just wanted to clarify why there wasn't anything on your agenda today.
Okay.
So we'll vote next week possibly, but yeah.
As soon as you have the
As soon as we
proper
have the paper.
paperwork for District Council to look at, we'll move forward.
And then there are a couple other things under other business if you.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to make you aware that the city of McMinnville is doing street construction. They have a bond measure, and so they are going to be closing the first and second near the transit center sometime in June. And so we're working out the details, but it is very possible that we may have to move all of the buses over to where it used to be, right in front of this building, at the old transit center for a period of time. They're telling us it may, if we want to avoid all the construction, because once, the first and second street will be done, but then there's other construction all around, so it could create a lot of detours. So it may just be simpler for the buses to move from like June till possibly as late as October. But I don't have all the details, so I'm going to come back to that, but it's just giving you a heads up.
Excuse me, Cynthia, and that's at the city's request.
It's at the city's request.
Yeah.
It complicates our world a little bit, because we have some changes that we want to be making to serve, timing changes and things we've talked about for a while. So we're actually meeting tomorrow where we're going to try and work out all of the timeline and details of all of that, and then we'll come back to you with what the best approach we think will be.
Okay, we'll get together on that because we really need to map out a strategy that
That works.
everybody's aware of because it's going to create some issues for the courthouse too, and so.
So did you guys talk about doing like what they're doing with the high school on Hill Road where they're having one lane of traffic, like
They talked about that. There's,
One way,
it's
one
a
way,
longer
one lane.
conversation. We'll probably have to talk about it in work session once I get.
Four
Once
months is-
once First Transit and we have a longer meeting, we can really figure out what it means from our side of the issue. Then we can talk about it. I'll schedule
Yeah.
something.
We'll have some conversation with the city and make
They
sure
seem
that.
like they're willing to be flexible. We went to their open house. And they had come over and talked to the First Transit also and had a fairly lengthy meeting with them, but there's just more to be discussed, I think. But I just wanted to put it on your radar. It's probably something's going to happen there. Tonight is the final, according to the scope of work, it's our final PAC, Project Advisory Committee meeting for the Transit Development Plan. So I just wanted to let you know that it's at 6:30 at City of McMinnville, Kent Taylor Room, and they will be reviewing all the various service options. It includes the first draft of a kind of a long-range financial plan, which there's time for edits. I haven't even really had time to spend much time reviewing that. So I just wanted to let you know about that. We did get an estimate. I think I emailed everybody, maybe, I don't know if I emailed Christian, but tell me if I didn't. The state's estimate for the new funding for the State Transportation Improvement Fund. We had budgeted $400,000 in this coming year, and their estimate, which they think is conservative, was for 96, I think is what they estimated. I can't remember, I didn't bring a copy, but I will have one tonight, so I
Okay.
I can't swear I saw it, but it doesn't sound.
I'll forward it. They just forwarded it last week, I think.
And that's the estimate for 19?
For 19.
For 19.
That's just the PAC, that's just the PAC meeting.
Yeah, tonight is the PAC meeting, and yes.
Right.
I don't know that we need to change the budget, but we can talk about that. I think it's,
I
it's an
think-
estimate, it's the state's best estimate based on what they know from their conversations with the Department of Revenue.
I think we'll want to change.
Okay, so I'll get you the list, and then they do show it going, I can't remember the number, but it's close to $1 million the next year, and a little more than that the following year, so.
Do you know, Cynthia, how far along are they almost done with the all the administrative? rules yet?
They're-
They've submitted their draft final proposal to OTC. I don't know if OTC's voted on it yet, but it's very, very.
They'll be doing it at this May's meeting, yeah, which is, I believe, the 15th is when they're meeting.
You know, it is what it is. I'm not totally thrilled with a couple things, but, the sausage making of government is, you get little
Okay.
pieces.
All right. Anything else that you'd like to bring our attention to at this time, Cynthia? Okay. So is there any other business anybody would like to bring before this YCTA board? Okay, hearing none, then we will adjourn this meeting of the Yamhill County Transit Area Board of Directors. I thank everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
Cynthia.
you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
You go to Joe's office, you can see if there's a line, there's a monitor on the wall. Oh yeah, you just watch the color code, so you can give me a that's a simple color code, it won't do me any good.
Carrie's gonna come over and set up over the room upstairs.
Unless you have enough coffee. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect, thank you.
Feeling better.
Did you make him sick?
Yeah, well, no, he didn't. We're just hanging out. I got a copy of the slides. And then, should I give this? To Carolina.
Good, how are you? Good to see you too.
That's what we were talking about.
What's that?
That's what we was talking about. You did the video?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got like a 10. I have to look at shopping for like a year, because it's just me. And we must walk the front row.
As a rate analyst, it's psychology. I did last year
You'd be surprised how many questions, how many times I get that question.
It's really not, it's, I'm not saying, but say, just we can never. I just missed easy, you guys do all sorts of cycling.
We do.
I know. I like the place where we are now.
Why did you move a couple hundred to house?
Well, we sold an 82 acre property. My friend was selling our adjacent properties at the same time. So this we were in contract, which I'd like to get. I just moved across the street. No matter what anybody tells you, moving across the street is just like castles moving across the country. Just like Kenmore Abbey Road, so the different where Abbey Road converts to Union Road. We more yesterday transition. So I know we've got 20 and just updated the map. And we'll post on the website, and a lot of them are in the close to
We're sure that bond went with that transfer of ownership. All right. So Bonnie.
I don't know where your house is, but I know generally where your house is. Silent Solar is right just south of the city of Fairfield.
This meeting.
I didn't realize.
Usually it's not supposed to say.
Next generation.
Do you record everyone?
What's that?
Do you do everyone?
I try. I don't get them all, but I try.
Oh, very nice. Big nice.
You guys are moved out yesterday.
No, we're actually. It's a good setup. A lot of my colleagues and friends that are as good at the work-life balance. This is a good area to retire in. Right.
I'm free. Your name's on one of those, right?
Let's get it through on monkey.
Well, we're I'm not sure that's there.
And so it's all, everything that came, the planning commission is in the, get that about these guys. So they share how they're going. Yeah.
Morning. Welcome. At this time, we will open the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for April 26th at 10 a.m. Barry, would you lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This is the time we have set aside for invocation, and joining us is a woman who's made important strides in our community in leading a church along with her husband Joe. Lila Pearson is co-pastoring with her husband the Praise Churches in McMinnville and in Monmouth. They planted the church in Monmouth in 2001, added a campus in McMinnville in 2014. Lila loves people. I know this personally. I've watched her in action, has a heart to encourage young leaders, and her favorite thing is to be with her family, which includes 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren. So, Lila Pearson, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. Good morning, everyone. We'll pray. Lord Jesus, thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you that we can bring you our cares and concerns, and thank you for everyone here this morning. Father, I ask that you will bless and guide and direct the leaders of the city, county, state, and nation. Please give them strength and direction as they give of themselves and serve in so many ways. Guide them, and I ask that as they serve, you will bring them joy, peace, and health. Father, give them wisdom as they make decisions and work together. Thank you that you care about every detail of our lives, our families, our state, and nation. We look to you for strength and guidance, and again, we declare that you are faithful and we can trust you to help us in times of trouble and that you bring hope and healing always. You are good, and we ask you to help us see your goodness and mercy. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Lila, and thank you for what you guys do for our community.
Thank you.
Appreciate your coming. All right, we'll start with item A, which is public comment, and this is reserved for public comment on any other item except what we have on our agenda. So is there anybody here for anything other than the public hearing later on? Okay, I don't see that we have any intent to speak cards. So we'll start with A1, which is the consideration of adopting Resolution 180503-1 proclaiming May 3rd, 2018 as National Day of Prayer. And do we have a motion to approve?
I would make a motion to approve that. Do we have a copy of the?
Yeah, I'll be reading it as soon as I have a motion.
Okay. The motion is on the floor.
All right, we have a motion to approve the resolution, and I'll go ahead and read it before we have discussion. Whereas the National Day of Prayer is a tradition first proclaimed by the Continental Congress in 1775, and whereas Congress has declared May 3rd, 2018 as the official observance of the National Day of Prayer, and whereas the National Day of Prayer is an opportunity for Americans of all faiths to join in united prayer to give thanks for blessings received, to request healing for wounds endured, and to ask for guidance for our leaders and to bring wholeness to the United States and her citizens. And whereas the National Day of Prayer is an opportunity for Americans to pray for what they feel is important for the city, the county, the state, this country, and the world in total. Now, therefore, the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim May 3rd, 2018 as the National Day of Prayer to encourage citizens to join in prayer asking for guidance and strength for our people and our leaders so that we may meet the challenges that lie before us with wisdom and courage. Is there any other discussion on this?
No.
All right, hearing none. All those in favor of item A1 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Let the record show that Commissioners Olson, Primizich, and Starrett voted in the affirmative. On to item B, which is the consent agenda, and that is as written. Do we have any concerns or questions about that? Do we have a motion to approve?
I move approval of the consent agenda as it's presented in our packet.
Okay, motion to approve item B. That's our consent agenda. Any further discussion?
Then some more discussion on my part.
No discussion?
No
Hearing
discussion.
none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. Let the record show that Commissioners Olson, Primizich, and Starrett voted in the affirmative. On to old business, we have none. Other business, we have item D1, the consideration of the transfer of the appropriation authority and funds in the amount of $358,932 from the discretionary fund, which is 10002, to our transportation fund, which is 1033, for the purchase of 4 new buses.
Madam Chair, this is the amount that Cynthia, our transit manager, got for us yesterday. I didn't want to put this on the consent agenda because we didn't have the exact amount, but that is what she gathered for you.
Okay, so we have that amount. Do we have we have a motion to approve?
Also move.
Okay, motion to approve. Item D1, any further discussion?
Yes, I just think it's important to recognize that we have a very, very ancient bus system. Our transit system is full of buses that need replacing. This was originally going to be leasing, but I think it's an appropriate time to move forward and start purchasing new buses so that we can move forward with our transit activities. So I'm very happy to see us doing this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. So we have a motion to approve item D1. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the motion passes, and let the record show that Commissioners Olson, Primizich, and Starrett voted in the affirmative. So at this point, we will open the public hearing and recess formal session, open the public hearing for docket G-01-17, which is a request by Yamhill County to consider amendments to the Yamhill County zoning ordinance to prohibit the siting of commercial solar generation facilities on a tract that contains predominantly Class 1 through 4 soils, unless an exception is taken pursuant to OAR 660 Division 4. So at this point, we've got, everybody has filled out a card, and yeah, if we could have those, if there are any others out there. So what I'd like to say at this point is that we have received voluminous information on the topic. I'd like to ask everybody to keep an open mind, to have no preconceptions, and the other thing I'd like to ask is...
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. No, that's fine. And then basically, what I'd like to do is to ask everybody, if you have, if you're making testimony today on this topic, if you could limit your comments to 3 minutes. And the other thing is, if you have heard someone else voice what your concerns are about this topic, maybe if you could just step forward, give us your name and say, I oppose or I support this ordinance, and then we can move on so that everyone gets a chance to be heard. So and we ask for civility, and we ask that everybody here listen to other opinions that might not be theirs, and we appreciate your being here to weigh in. So I would like to start, though, with County Council, Mr. Sadlow, could you clarify a little bit, sort of give us the base code of the state statute as it stands in regards to this proposed ordinance change?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioners, we are operating under an Oregon administrative rule that was promulgated by the Land Conservation and Development Commission that allows these facilities on 12 acres, and Ken knows as much about this as I do. So this would be offering greater protection than is provided by that administrative rule. And apparently there are discussions now for amending that rule. The information that was provided to you deals mostly with the larger facilities, over 300 acres. But it sounds like it may be the same sort of effect that's going on, where there's been a rush to do the projects that are smaller because it's easier to do than trying to get an exception for the big 20 acres, which is exceedingly hard to do. You have to make findings that the statewide planning goals and your local comprehensive plan goals should not apply in order to approve something like that. So unless I'm missing the answer to your question, I think that's where we are, is that we're dealing right now under an Oregon administrative rule, and this would amend our ordinance to provide greater protection to farmland than that rule currently provides.
Because if I'm reading the statute right, the OAR, it says farmland, but we're talking about specific classes of soils. So is that the distinction?
Well, that's part of it, and I think Ken does understand that part of it better, but
it talks about high-value farmland, that if it's on a high-value farmland, you're limited to 12 acres of a solar facility. So this ordinance change would identify parcels that had predominantly Class 1 through 4 soils. They would not be allowed to have a solar facility on them unless an exception was taken.
Okay.
Now, high-value designation, I think, includes more areas that may include soils that are not Class 1 through 4. So.
Okay, great. All right. So at this time, I thought what we do is just start. So if we want to come on up, and I'll call out your name based on the cards that we have before us. If you would state your name and address for the record, please, we'd appreciate that. Let's start with Joel Kiff. Mr. Kiff? Thanks for coming. First at bat.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Joel Kiff. I live at 13546 Willis Road in McMinnville. I represent myself, and I also represent the board of the Yamhill Carlton Wine Growers Association. as a board, and personally, we are in support of changing the ordinance so there is a prohibition of solar installations on farmland. Our basic position is that agricultural land should be preserved for agricultural purposes. It is our opinion that solar generation does not meet the standard of what agriculture is. I know that a lot of people feel like this is a property rights issue, but speaking as a farmer, and most farmers around here, we benefit from property tax deferral. So the county has given us a financial break in return for telling us basically what we can and can't do with our land. Our land is supposed to be kept in agriculture, and so I think we are obligated to conform with that kind of instructions from the county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleen Payne?
My name is Colleen Payne. My address is 6170 Northeast Old McMinnville Highway in Carlton. I am here to oppose the amendment. We do live on a century farm, and it has been in the family since 1882 and consistently farmed in the family. But every generation, we're asked to accept and embrace change and innovation. And for the most part, initial decisions for innovation are to recoil and to postpone or procrastinate as long as possible. In 1968, our family farm, we weren't asked, did we want to have power lines transmission towers put on our property. It was done for the greater good. The greater good is Cascades Field and the city of McMinnville. Now, our property has actually been devalued because of those transmission lines and those transmission towers, because of the unsightliness. But it still is a benefit for people other than just us, and I think we have to consider the benefit of all as we move on. A few short years ago, LNG was going to be coming through. You know, we all went through that for a long time. It seems to have died down. Again, we were notified they were going to put their transmission pipeline through our property. We would not have had a choice, an opportunity to say, no, we don't want it. It would have been done, and with no compensation to us at all. This does come down to a couple of different things. It does come down to property rights. If you want solar panels on your farm, you don't have to have solar panels on your farm. We do have a small array that provides about 60% of the power for our on-farm operation. But people should have the opportunity, especially farmers, to diversify a bit and to have 12 acres. If you don't want it on yours, you don't have to have it on yours. You know, we have a lot of things put on us that we don't get to choose on. And this is one of those where I think we have to take a look at the future. We have to take a look at what's going to impact our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. What is innovation? And we should embrace the innovation. And that's my sense of it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Anthony Stewart?
Morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
My name is Anthony Stewart. I'm an EFUA landowner out on CUNY Road, rural Carlton. Judging by the looks of it, I'm probably one of the younger landowners here representing today, which means I'm representing not only this generation, but the next generation. And I'm here to present in opposition to a ban for, I'm sure, all the property and landowner rights that are going to be discussed here today, but most importantly on behalf of the next generation. Myself and a lot of people have made an investment in this community for the next 10, 15, 30, 40 years. And we do it because this is a really good community, but a good community cannot always stay a good community. It requires and necessitates understanding the proper amount of adaptation. I recently had the pleasure of driving from Tallahassee, Florida to Charlotte, North Carolina. And if you haven't had a chance to visit the southeast United States in the last few years, I would recommend doing it, because that is America's original agricultural hinterland. These are areas that are 1 to 2 hours outside of major metropolitan areas. And during that drive, I saw 4 or 5 communities with their football fields overgrown, completely dilapidated, fallen into decrepitude. And these are communities that 1 or 2 generations ago were posed with opportunities to adapt sensibly with input from a community, but recognizing that there's always a tide of change, and staying at the crest of that, not moving too far into the trough or falling too far behind, is the way that you keep a community from falling into that type of decrepitude. Everyone here has a role in the county, and you guys as elected persons, and a couple of persons may be elected in this room, have a legacy. And as a legacy, thinking about not only where you are right now, but where you're going to be for me in 20 years, for my children in 20 years, who I hope to be able to raise and continue to raise in this community, I hope that we can continue a message that adaptation is where things need to go. It includes innovation, includes property rights and keeping everything, but you have to think about, what is this decision going to look like in 25 years when agriculture continues to shift internationally and those that have farming interests were prevented from, at least, as was said before, diversifying their portfolio and creating an opportunity to sustain themselves moving forward. Thank you for your time. Look forward to your decision.
Thank you very much. Emily Malloy. Hello.
Emily Malloy, 29870 Southwest Mill Creek Road, Sheridan, Oregon. Plenty will be said today regarding the pros and cons of solar arrays located on prime farmland. As you ponder those pros and cons, I respectfully request that you keep in mind and investigate the very companies at the root of the placement of the arrays. Vet the companies themselves, vet the information brought forth by them during their presentations, and follow up once an array is approved to be sure the board order is actually being followed. I live across the road from the Mill Creek Solar Project. It is now built. Our personal experience is that these issues we brought up during the whole process are indeed issues we are now dealing with, although we were reassured by the company building the facility that these would indeed not be evident. Noise from the converter is heard beyond the array border. There is glare from the panels. The lack of planting of the trees and foliage to hide the green slatted chain link fence along 2 borders of it, and there's still a large pile of soil left to the side of the array, etc., and so forth. We invite you to our neighborhood to sit down and talk about the frustrations with the process, the issues we are left with, and thoughts for the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nathan Butler.
Good morning. My name is Nathan Butler. I represent Forefront Power. We are a solar developer headquartered in San Francisco. I appreciate the opportunity today to speak, and I want to focus my comments on the local benefits that these solar projects generate for the community. Excluded from the ban is on-site, projects serving on-site load, and I think many of the farms and wineries have taken advantage of solar and have installed solar to help them manage their electricity needs, help them manage their costs going forward. This is a great use of solar. Many of the residents and businesses in the community don't have the ability. If you rent a home, you can't do solar. If you have trees at your home, you can't effectively put in solar. These projects, the community solar in particular, is a new program enacted by the legislature and the Utility Commission that allows these projects to serve people who cannot put solar on their own home, cannot put solar on their own land due to whatever reason. At the size we are talking about, at a 12-acre project, they are very small, relatively. Solar at 12 acres is going to feed local load. It's not going to be delivered long distances. It is not going to be delivered to other states. It's going to be generated and used locally. It is also going to have the benefits, the economic benefits will stay local with community members who are able to subscribe and participate in these projects. So I just want to point that out and appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Mason Rawl. Hi, Mason.
Good morning. Hi, my name's Mason Rolfe. I do all my mailing electronically, so you can reach me at rolfemason@gmail.com. I am a resident of Oregon for 6 years. I'm not currently a resident of Yamhill, but I felt drawn to comment on this issue for 2 reasons. The first is that I hold a bachelor's degree entitled Sustainable Agricultural and Energy Systems. Made me particularly interested. I also have been, for the last 8 months, an intern for a National Solar Trade Coalition, traveling the country learning about solar policy. So I feel like I wanted to address land issue concerns here. These are issues that are coming up everywhere where solar is being installed, so that means that innovative solutions are also being found in those areas. And I have a great appreciation for what I see happening here, which is a community coming together to protect the land. I encountered a similar community doing the same thing in Farmington, Minnesota, where a corporation was trying to build a large community solar farm. The community was concerned with the soil impacts of the array, so they asked that the array was co-planted with native pollinator plants with deep roots, which, as I learned in college and was affirmed during my research for today, help increase water retention, increase aeration, increase biodiversity, and provide large swaths of bee habitat. I hope people in this room understand how important it is to support our honeybees right now. The array was built with the community's consent and now provides over 200 residential customers with lower electricity rates and a farmer with a 25-year lease. The point I'm trying to make is that the urge to protect your land, especially from external threats, is not only natural but admirable. However, based on the Planning Commission decision and the written and verbal testimony supporting at that meeting, I feel very strongly that this effort, while admirable and honorable, is taking the wrong approach. If you're concerned with the size of the arrays, you could regulate the arrays to be smaller. If you're concerned with the impact of the arrays on the quality of the soil, you could require the proper soil management techniques. If you're concerned about the quantity of arrays, you could retain the power to decline applications. And I would encourage you to consider adding the following questions during system approval process. Will farming be able to continue with the presence of the array? And will it be possible to fully farm the land after the arrays are removed? So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Nick, I'm going to butcher your name. Is it Giannatino? Is that close? Hi, Nick. Yes, sir.
Point of order, has the group here had a chance to look at the most recent map?
I did present the most recent map, and they all have copies of it.
Okay, I'll do my best to meet your timeline.
Thank you.
So thank you, Madam Chairman and fellow commissioners. My name is Nick Giannatino. I live at Southwest Mill Street in Sheridan. Thanks for the opportunity to provide comment. Previously, submitted comments are in the record.
Thank you.
So I retired after nearly 40 years with the United States Department of Agriculture, and my wife and I own a small farm just outside of Sheridan. We've been providing input for about 2 years. And we're not opposed to solar power as long as it's appropriately sited and scaled, right size, right location. Commercial solar power generating facilities can be sited in multiple locations, unlike our agricultural lands, which are limited, and our agricultural land should be the last place that we think about locating solar power generation facilities. The reference to the map is obvious, and I'll describe it. Our farm's about a half a mile to the southwest of the Mill Creek Solar Development. The proposed 40-plus acre solar facility in the city of Sheridan is 1 mile to the northeast of our house. It's less than 1 mile to the proposed Good Bob Farm solar facility on southwest Ballston Road. It's less than 1.5 miles to the proposed Brant Farm solar facility on southwest Ballston Road. It's less than 3 miles to the solar facility along Highway 22 that you see on the way to Grand Ronde. And yesterday I learned that there is a proposal for Red Prairie Solar located 1/4 mile from my front door. And today, Ken tells me that we had 3 more applications in that same general vicinity. Enough is enough. We need your help. We need your action now, We need to stop the loss of our important agricultural lands to commercial power generation. So if we do not approve this proposal, I'd like to make sure that any review and approval process include an evaluation of the cumulative effects on prime farmland, the cumulative effects on fragmentation of large blocks of farmland necessary to maintain the agricultural economy in the state and county and the nation and important wildlife habitats, the effects on the quality of life of rural residents, which I think has been lacking, the effects on visual resources and view sheds, and the irreversible effects from the loss of productivity for the service life of these installations. A quick note, there are some portions I'd like to emphasize in that review and approval process. Yamhill County Zoning Ordinance 1101.02 talks about the characteristics of adjoining and surrounding uses, and the comments or recommendations of adjacent vicinity property owners whose interests may be affected. And another key element is Section 1202.02D. Quote, the proposed use will not alter the character of the surrounding area in a manner which substantially limits, impairs, or prevents the use of the surrounding properties for the permitted uses listed in the underlying zoning district, which includes rural residences on those district properties. So until that recent decision in Carlton, it appears that those criteria weren't given appropriate consideration. So I want you to make sure that we focus an appropriate and adequate review in considering those criteria and any pending proposals. I'd also ask that if any other proposals are approved, that all of them include a provision for an appropriate site restoration bond to assure the removal of structures and to guarantee the farmland is restored to its pre-development condition at the end of the service life of the facility. This is important. We need your action now. This amendment is the result of hundreds of pages of written input, public hearing testimony, and the recommendations of the Yamhill County Planner and the Planning Commission. The reasonable and prudent course of action is to approve this amendment. As our duly elected representatives, I urge you to approve the proposal under consideration to make it effective immediately before we lose even more Yamhill County farmland and commercial power generating facilities. I encourage you to follow the example of your colleagues in Marion County who have already enacted a similar ordinance to protect their valuable agricultural lands. And I understand that Polk County is considering similar actions. So we need you to act in our best interest to preserve not only our way of life, both now and in the future, for our sake and our children's sake. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Ron Hutchinson?
Excuse me. Ron Hutchison, 13270 Roland Road, Carlton, Oregon. Commissioners, my wife and I, we are opposed to the siting of solar facilities on our farmlands, our rural farmlands. We are rural landowners ourselves and have too much of seen too much of the finest land in the world lost to non-farm uses. My wife, excuse me, my wife recently saw a chart showing the large number of existing non-farm uses on rural Yamhill County. It was very, very disturbing. Siting solar facilities on our farmland will further contribute to the diminishing valuable resource we are blessed to have here. Even our poorer soils are useful. For example, they can grow trees very well. In our case, we were told our poorest soil was good for certain forage and desired for zoo animals. We understand that some landowners wanting to have a supplemental income, but at what cost to our county? We too briefly considered solar income, but would not do that to our community or the county we love and respect. These facilities will not only remove the land from agricultural use for many years to come, but will impact property values, wildlife, and habitat, and our natural beauty, with no benefit to others or the county. Solar facilities should be placed in regions with greater amounts of sunlight, and in my packet that I presented over here, you have some attachments that show some maps. If solar facilities are to be in our county, there are other placement options. Other than our rural farmland, they could be placed on an enormous amount of roof surfaces available, abandoned industrial sites, etc. Solar energy, while very appealing, has serious environmental downsides that are being addressed, and the industry is rapidly evolving. For example, in urban areas, the appearance issue is being addressed through the development of photovoltaic shingles, windows, and other technologies that blend more seamlessly with the existing structures. So then, why commit to the loss of our farmlands, our rural farmlands, for possible short-lived, problematic projects such as solar facilities? We request that you prohibit these solar facilities as soon as possible, and if possible, retroactively to stop the existing requests for them, as it appears that the solar site developers are sure courting Yamhill residents and landowners. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Billie Jean Matthews?
Billie Jean Matthews, you can call me BJ, 19643 Northwest Goodrich Road. I am opposed to this ordinance change. And since time is limited,
Thank you.
thank you for the opportunity to testify, and thanks again to the Planning Department for providing updated maps. Because of time limitations, I will comment on only two main points: the impact of the solar ordinance change on commercial solar installations, and two, suggested alternatives to commercial installations. I've included enhanced versions of the maps provided by the Planning Department. Please note that the substation 3-mile buffers are shown in magenta for visibility. I've also placed the substation 3-mile buffer circles on the other two maps provided by the Planning Department, should anyone wish to look at the impact of various options. Please note that the locations of the solar installations are represented by the location, size, and shape of the tax lot on which they are sited. This is a practical matter, since it is the way the county keeps track of each application. Also, you would not be able to see a 12-acre dot on these maps. Thus, a 12-acre installation on a 186-acre tax lot is represented by that tax lot, which does not represent the actual size of the installation. So there's three maps there. I think you've seen Ken's. On page 146 of the packet for this hearing, at the March 1st Planning Commission hearing, Mr. Friday stated there would be 180,000 acres available for commercial solar. The examination of the Planning Department's map shows that there are about 130,000 acres in Yamhill County that lie within 3 miles of a substation. Most of this 130,000 acres is Class 1 through 4 soils, or encompasses cities, towns, roads, rivers, or floodplains, and would not be available for commercial solar installations under this zoning ordinance change. So where are the 180,000 acres, and how many of these acres available for solar lie within 3 miles of a substation and near a 3-phase line, which is required for practical putting in an installation? In essence, this proposed amendment brings commercial solar installation to a screeching halt in Yamhill County. Apparently, Yamhill County's commitment to statewide renewable energy goals are at best lip service. Seems like everyone wants Boardman shut down, but doesn't want to step up to the plate to do their part. The second thing I want to comment on is the suggestion that there are other places to put solar installations, which is true. It has been suggested in previous testimony before the Planning Department that solar installations should be done on buildings or over parking lots. Sounds like a good idea. But driving around Yamhill County, you see few solar panels other than those at vineyards. Could be most people have too many trees or a roof angled in the wrong direction. Maybe some can't afford them, even with subsidies, and those that can would rather spend their money elsewhere. No specific facts supporting this option as an alternative to commercial solar installations have been presented. This should not be that hard to do, as I testified at the Planning Department hearing. Why not put some tech-savvy kids to work on this? That would be better than spending their time on Twitter and Facebook, and might actually produce something useful. One journal article was submitted for the record at that hearing. It was a study of alternatives to agricultural land for siting solar installations in California's Central Valley, called CCV for short. It suggested salt-contaminated lands and packing sheds, among others. But Oregon is not the CCV. We don't have salt-contaminated lands and thousands of fruits and vegetable packing sheds. We do have something the CCV does not: snow. Witnessed the $100 million damage to packing sheds in eastern Oregon last year. I wonder what the price tag would have been if they had had solar units on their roofs. I do think that those who are so opposed to commercial solar installations should consider funding such a study for various regions in Oregon. If you want an alternative, figure out how to make it work. We as a county do not seem very committed to the state's renewable energy goals. It seems there are a lot of people who believe in global warming, but not enough to do anything about it. The decision, at least for now, is up to you, but it's never a good idea to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Thank you. Damian Hall?
Chair, Commissioners, Damian Hall, 101 Southwest Main Street, Suite 1100, Portland, Oregon, 97204. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I'm just going to touch on a couple things here because I think you've heard a pretty good cross-section of folks with different interests in this ordinance. One thing I'd like to clarify is that I'm here on behalf of Cypress Creek Renewables. My client is not wedded to the status quo, but is opposed to this ordinance because it is an outright ban. It is a prohibition functionally on utility scale solar in Yamhill County. What we would like to do is have a collaborative discussion with the county about how to reach an understanding that's based on facts and driven by facts about what the impacts of solar are versus what are more just worries and noise that are out there in the community, and come to a narrowly tailored policy solution that addresses the concerns of the county commissioners, as opposed to what's proposed here before you today, which is an outright ban. I think a lot of some of the confusion and some of the issues come from how this is framed. You hear a lot of this being framed as this is agriculture on one hand versus solar development on the other hand. And that's not necessarily the case if you look at the facts. Solar is a tool that can be used by landowners and farmers in support of further sustaining their agricultural operations. At its best, solar is a 12-acre diversified income stream on a much larger farm. And when you talk about wanting to preserve lands, farmland, keep in mind that each one of these projects starts as a conversation over a dinner table with a farmer. No landowner or farmer that's worth their salt is going to is going to allow leasing of their most productive 12 acres to a solar interest. So that's why you see a lot of these projects. They're pushed up against roads. They're in the corner of a larger tract. They're the least productive acres. And they're being turned into something that, yes, you hear it, some people do not want to see and do not want to look at and don't feel like they're consistent with a pastoral character. But what they're allowing folks to do is sustain their agricultural operations on the balance of their land. You're also hearing that there's conflict between the historic EFU laws and Oregon land use system and solar generation and development. And that's also inaccurate. If you go back to Senate Bill 101, which was passed in 1975 and established the state's land use, or state's agricultural land use policy, It includes a generic statement about facilities that generate electricity up to 12 acres are allowed as conditional uses on agricultural land, EFU land. So that's been around since the beginning of land use planning in Oregon. The idea that EFU and rural lands will be looked to for energy generation purposes. It's just that solar has now some 30 to 40 years later here become a technology that's actually viable at that scale. But if you take a look, even if you do pass this ordinance, you will still have in your code the ability for folks to put power generation facilities that are up to 12 acres, think coal plants, think natural, liquid natural gas facilities, those will still be allowed. And again, I think we just, Ms. Matthews gave a good discussion of it, but this concept of rural lands versus elsewhere, there's not really a viable alternative to get to scale as far as solar. Yeah, you can put a couple of panels on any given roof, but it's not necessarily the same public benefit to the county that we're looking at here. I'd also like to have a discussion, and I think, think of this process as the beginning of a discussion, potentially like was done in Marion County, to put together a task force to actually look at these issues, because there's a whole lot of issues out there that haven't gotten to the board as part of the record of, hearings on specific applications and particular projects. But there are a lot of limitations on the number of projects that are possible in Yamhill County. You've heard mentioned that these projects need to be within a radius of particular substation. That's accurate, but it's not that any number of projects can happen in the radius of any particular substation. Each of these substations has a particular capacity, which is a number of megawatts that they can take on. So there's a limited amount of projects that can be in the distribution system of any given substation. So there are natural limitations. PGE, again, has approached the PUC for the second year in a row about reducing the rates that it would be required to pay for power from solar-generated power here in Yamhill County. So these projects are getting squeezed in a number of ways. It's not that there's a land rush and it will go on indefinitely and these projects will proliferate. Speaking on behalf of my clients, that perception is out there. Some of the solar developers have sort of aided that perception by marketing in a broad swath fashion and approaching a number of property owners through mailings and that type of thing. However, it's not that every property owner that receives a mailing that their site will ever turn into a project, and it's not even that every application that the city's received already will actually turn into a developed project. So there's a lot of information out there that we'd love to have a conversation with the county and with staff about, so that we can really understand what the limitations are and not just reflexively pass a ban because there's sentiment that there are too many of these projects and that we're not sure where this will all end. So we do think that putting together a task force like Marion County is doing to collectively get to some of this baseline facts to make policy decisions on would be a good idea, and would welcome the opportunity to be involved in such an effort here in Yamhill County. Unless you have any questions, that's it for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If anybody wants to stand up, please feel free, because sitting for as long as we're going to be sitting is not a healthy thing. So if you want to stand up, now might be a good chance. And we can stand up while we do this, if that's okay, because I know that sitting is not conducive to good blood flow. So as long as we maintain our decorum and can hit the mics, I don't see any reason why we can't stand up while we talk and listen. And when you feel like you want to sit down, sit down. But is that okay with everybody? Okay, because they say sitting is the new smoking. And I quit that 30 years ago, but I'm still sitting. So, all right, let's go. Mr. Friedman, are you You okay with some of us standing while you?
You're the chair.
No, I'm just.
I guess chair might not be the right. No, I'm with you. Here's my doc to see.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
I apologize for trying to get the text up worked out here.
It's okay.
Or a preschooler.
Really, 12-year-old.
Preschooler, yeah.
2-year-old.
2-year-old.
Boy, that's true.
Thank you very much. Okay, looks like they got it figured out for me. So, commissioners, my wife and I strongly support this docket. We sorely need to protect our best farmland from conversion to industrial energy production. The pace of applications for industrial solar power has turned into a flood, including in just the last week or two. Ken would know the numbers better than I do, but as of now, we have hundreds of acres of farm ground in Yamhill County that have either already been approved or have pending applications for industrial solar generation. My wife and I grow hay west of Carlton on some profitably, including on some pretty wet, poorly farmed, poorly drained ground. And like many other farms around the county, we've received multiple unsolicited letters from developers of large-scale industrial solar arrays. We would be very happy to forego industrial solar arrays on our farm and see other Class 1 through 4 soils protected as well. Our support for this amendment has nothing to do with the aesthetics of solar arrays. It has everything to do with the incremental piecemeal conversion of our good farmland to industrial non-farm uses. As Commissioner Garrettson said at the hearing in front of the Planning Commission, our resource here in Yamhill County isn't sunshine, it's our dirt. Our agricultural industry already uses solar energy sustainably to produce crops. It's called farming. As noted in the staff report, there are a host of alternative locations for commercial solar power generation, and I'd like to just show a few. Commercial solar generation can be located over parking lots. It can be located on warehouse roofs. It can be located on school roofs. It can be located on telephone poles and other utility poles. And it can be located on brownfield abandoned industrial sites, of which we have a number in this county. And in some ways, these are ideal for commercial power generation because they're already asphalted or graveled and they won't take land out of production. This is SP Newsprint, that's closed, 140 acres, that's graveled and asphalted. This is the Liberty Manufacturing home plant that's abandoned on the east end of Sheridan. This is the Fort Hill mill site, the abandoned mill by Fort Hill, just over the line in Polk County, 28 acres. So the benefits of these industrial solar farms go out of county to the industrial developers. They don't stay here in the county. During the Planning Commission hearing, The industry rep acknowledged that after they're built, they're unmanned. There are no jobs for all practical purposes associated with them. They don't reduce our rates. They don't reduce our electrical rates. And the economic benefit doesn't go to the county residents, unlike agriculture, which has a huge multiplier effect as it spreads through the local economy. So in closing, I'd just say that at the previous hearings on specific arrays, Cypress Creek's representatives said that they selected farmland because it's less expensive than other sites. But we can't continue to sacrifice agricultural lands because they are cheaper to lease than industrial land, abandoned mill sites, rooftops, etc. So I'd urge you to take an action similar to Marion County. As of March 14th of this year, Marion County, you can't go in and apply for a solar array on high-value farmland in Marion County. They took action, and I think we need to do so here as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if we could just try to pay a little bit of attention to that 3-minute time limit. There are a lot of folks who want to talk. And if you have heard any of your sentiments expressed, you might want to just come up and say, yeah, what he said, or something like that. Anyway, we'll go on to Josh Rojas.
Good morning, Commissioners. Josh Rojas, 2275 Southwest Barber Street. Although I don't own farmland myself, and I did sit on the last Planning Commission hearing and listen to a lot of different information shared, and after meeting with several farmers and several winery owners, I find this issue a little bit convoluted. And although I appreciate the testimony of the suits that are coming out of Portland and surrounding areas that have no vested interest other than the almighty dollar in our county, it has been the leadership in our county that has kept it the way it is. Hearing and talking about PEGE being able to reduce the cost of those areas, the rural communities who are already paying high costs through that company, I haven't seen, even talking to some of those residents, have not seen a decrease in the cost of what they're paying yet. So listening to that, I think backing it up with facts and seeing some of those things and making a decision based on facts, that I know some of the winery owners who have already attained attorneys to try to do more research. All of it's convoluted information that hasn't come forth yet. I feel like the gentleman who spoke before me, West Rock is holding that property basically hostage, but is willing to let go of it for $4 million itself. It's wide open. There are places like that they can be developed. But protecting this farmland and the agricultural community that has made this county what it is, and giving it to people who are coming out of Portland that are used to the concrete jungle, used to seeing things that don't make sense like that in our communities. I think to keep that out of this community and find different ways to find renewable resources would be the best way to do things in Yamhill County. I appreciate your guys' time. Thank you.
Thank you. Casey Kula?
I'm not intending to testify.
Oh, okay.
Pardon me.
Thank you.
Should I come up and say that?
No, you just did. Duly noted. And your address, please. Grace Shad?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Grace Schad, 31525 Northeast Schad Road, Newburgh. I'm representing myself, other members of Schad Orchards LLC, and the next generation of aspiring farmers who are still learning how to do this. I would like to say that I support the amendment to protect high-class farmland soils, and I support what the other people who support this ordinance have said. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. Thanks for coming. Alex Davis?
Alex Davis, 31655 Northeast Schad Road, Newburgh. So I also support what others have said before in Sorry, I thought I was going to do the written part, so I didn't actually say anything.
It's okay, you've submitted written testimony, so we're good.
Amendment.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for coming. Craig Markham? Okay, we have testimony, and we have your written testimony? Okay, thank you. Catherine Jernstedt.
My name is Catherine Jernstedt. I'm the president of Friends of Yamhill County. I'm also Catherine Jernstedt of the Frank and Anna Jernstedt Century Farm, 8156 Northeast Mineral Springs Road in Carlton. I'm here to speak in support of the recommendation and would point out that my family's been farming there along Mineral Springs Road since the 1880s, through some ups and downs and a whole lot of evolution in agricultural practices. We date back to pre-rural electrification. My father, Ernest Jernstedt, made it very clear to all of us that it was Oregon's unique land use system with the restrictions on development stemming from Senate Bill 100 and the property tax considerations for agricultural operations from Senate Bill 101 that allowed him to keep the farm together through some very tough times. There's been written testimony submitted by Tom Abrego, Friends of Yamhill County, and also some of the Jernstedt family members. So I want to highlight just a couple of points. Friends of Yamhill County supports the development of renewable energy, and we are not asserting that there's any inherent environmental hazard of photovoltaic panels. Rather, we're concerned about converting high-value agricultural lands to non-agricultural uses. Agriculture has been and remains the foundation of the Yamhill County economy and employment. Agriculture is the second largest sector in Oregon's economy, and this is accomplished on approximately 26% of the area within the state. Total acreage for resource land, including EFU for agriculture, is dropping every year, and we need to arrest this trend. There have been employment analysis that tie 1 in 8 Oregon jobs to agriculture. The economic multiplier of farm gate sales to total new dollars in an economy is frequently quoted at 5. They did a study in Marion County. The multiplier was 6. So we're comparable to them, I would say. So for every dollar off the farm, the community is seeing $6. This is a significant multiplier effect. And this is also in contrast to the commercial solar projects where the leases provide income to the landowner and only short-term employment during construction. Soils are critical to successful agriculture, but so is the infrastructure. We old-timers remember when there were elevators, farm supply, outlets, and equipment businesses in nearly every community. Some change can be attributed to the change in the scale of modern agriculture, but there's also the forces of fragmentation. Every business has a tipping point where the cost and inconvenience of serving a fragmented service area force it out of business. There's also a tipping point for sustaining viable farms. With fewer vendor options, the costs and travel distances increase. There's more commercial traffic traveling further and mixing more with drivers not accustomed to farm equipment. And it goes beyond the individual farmland that is lost. The Planning Department did a strong discussion of the alternatives. It also makes clear that this is not an outright ban. Net metering and non-commercial projects can still go forward, but we strongly support the proposed change before you. With the veritable land rush of applications, it would seem appropriate to enact it as an emergency measure if possible. Marion County is going to have this discussion, but they have opted to arrest the flow while they have the discussion. Appreciate the opportunity to present testimony, and I have submitted electronically a copy of an Oregon Department of Agriculture publication called The Comprehensive Valuation of Agricultural Lands. a perpetual investment in Oregon's economy and environment. Granted, it speaks to my point of view, but I think it speaks to it very eloquently, and it is also the source of my statistics. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Jonathan Nelson.
Good morning. My name is Jonathan Nelson. I'm not from the county. I came from Portland. But thank you for having us here today.
But you don't have a suit on.
I don't have a suit.
Yeah.
Casual guy. Very friendly, easy to get along with. Thank you for taking the time to hear all of our opinions and thoughts on this issue. So I am a solar developer. I develop the kinds of solar arrays that are being considered by this amendment. I'm also a native Oregonian. I grew up in a rural area between Wilsonville and Newburgh. And while I was not raised on a commercial farm, I do appreciate our region's agricultural heritage and what it does for our sense of place and community. My work as a solar developer is motivated by the desire to help preserve our resources and improve our quality of life. Renewable solar energy accomplishes this by displacing dirty fossil fuels that contribute to climate change, while hydroelectric generation makes up a significant portion of the electricity in the Northwest. Oregon fossil fuels can still account for as much as 30% of our generation mix during drought years when water resources are scarce. In other words, our state emits more greenhouse gases from burning fossil fuels during periods of warmer temperatures. And that's an unsettling reality for anyone who is concerned with climate change. And arguably, it's climate change that poses a greater risk to the vitality of agriculture in the region. And from this, it's interesting to me that many who are against solar in the county are in some way connected to the wine industry, which recently has begun to elevate the environment and sustainability in its business operations and marketing. Aside from how local zoning code can be tied to larger macro issues, the idea to ban solar as a way to protect high-value soils has other inherent inconsistencies that show that this is really an attempt to limit personal property rights of landowners and protect the interest of one industry at the expense of another. If the intent is to protect high-value soils, why are there no limits on how many acres of high-value soil a nursery can cover with gravel and planter pails? Why are solid waste facilities, landfills, personal airports, surface mining for irrigation, natural gas processing facilities, bottling water, and other commercial utility facilities permitted on EFU lands with high-value soils? With this in mind, I would like to submit the following to the board for consideration with this issue. Solar is hands down one of the most benign forms of energy production with minimal environmental impacts and negative externalities. It is also one of the most benign uses, or one of the most benign among permitted uses on EFU land and high-value soils. While it occupies the land on which it resides, it does not disturb the soil, which can easily be put back into production when the equipment is removed, and the land still remains classified as EFU land even when the solar array is on the parcel. Disallowing solar but allowing other more impactful uses on EFU land is discriminatory and unreasonable. Oregon's current land use rules that a lot of these applications are subject to limit solar to occupying only 48 acres or 2.4% of lands within a 1-mile radius from each project. Furthermore, potential development sites are constrained by other natural barriers such as wetlands, floodplains, infrastructure limitations, and most of all, needing to have a willing landowner that wants to work with us. Solar does not make farming more difficult for the property owner or any adjacent parcels. Basic economic principles dictate that a farmer will not give up their best acreage for a solar project and will lease their most marginal ground. And stemming from that, income from a solar lease helps improve the financial health and longevity of farm operations by diversifying a farmer's annual revenue. And so as an interested party, I'd like to ask that this issue be objectively considered and the facts made known before making any significant revisions to the code. And to assist in that policy-making process, I'm sure that developers like myself and others would be happy to engage with you and the community to work together towards something that strikes the right balance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia, is it Juber?
I'm going to sit closer because I wasn't able to hear. I'm getting old, so I wasn't able to hear some
We're all
of the
getting
people
old.
that were speaking. And if I'm too loud, please tell me to quiet down. I'm here on behalf of my father, who is still, in my opinion, an alleged murder victim from Sheridan Care Nursing Home over 20 years ago, because 60 years ago, I remember sitting with him as I was sitting out in the garden pulling rocks, pulling weeds, getting rocks, putting them in the barrel, putting weeds in the barrel. And I wanted him to pay me. And he said, you know, someday you're going to thank me for what you're doing now. And I thank him today because he organically gardened. He bought small farms, fixed them up, and then moved. I lived on probably 10 small farms by the time I was 12. Well, not quite maybe, but pretty close. And he believed in small farms because not only did he grow the most beautiful vegetables, and I was raised to be 71 on superior milk, we would eat them right out of the ground, dirt and all, because the dirt was good and clean. He said solar is the way to go. 60 years ago, he had a hot water tank he made it for solar. We took our baths in that on numerous occasions. So he believed in solar. He bought the first Volkswagen. He believed in not having gas, using too much gas, because my dad believed in this earth. He believed in taking care of it. He believed in the soil. He had to move to Alabama to be able to afford, and I think it was 11 acres of beautiful land with a pond. He was going to raise strawberries, but then he became too old and he got into dementia, and there were other issues involved. But he had to move to Alabama. I'm listening, and I appreciate what many of these folks have said, even the ones who think it's okay to have a solar farm, because I'm sorry, that is the most idiotic phrase to me in the world, a solar farm. Nobody can afford a small farm in this community. Nobody can afford a small farm in the Pacific Northwest anymore, because the land's being bought up by many very wealthy people. And my dad, I remember sitting there, and I remember him going, money, money, money. Someday, people are going to destroy this country because of money. And that's what is happening. Our beautiful valley is being overgrown population-wise. I got behind a farm truck, and you know what? I started singing with the radio and having a good time, because I knew it was going to take me time, because I knew what that farmer was doing. He was giving me beautiful veggies. The wine companies have bought up lots of land that could have been maybe developed into small farms. Many people are moving out of this area, out of this state, and I hate to say it, we might be, because we can't afford to have enough acreage to build a garden like we would like to have. Maybe if those 12 acres weren't made solar, maybe if they were made into a small farm that's strictly sold for small farm or leased for small farm, whatever it took, because so many developers, they've come in, they've made developments, there's no solar adaptability, there's nothing, and it's all about money. I'm sorry, our world is running, our country is going to hell in a handbasket because of money right now. And my dad, I was on my way to Hillsborough. I'd forgot about this meeting. And I was on my way to Hillsborough to pick up some medication because I've been having some sickness here lately. And I remember, oh my God, the meeting. I don't have my written statement, which was basically what I had in the newspaper. But the newspaper took out some of what I wrote in my letter to the editor. And part of what I wrote was, you know, we might have a lot of wonderful wineries, bring visitors, bring people here to our area to drink our world-class wine. But I'm asking myself, a lot of that land, plus what might, if solar is allowed, and I'm sorry, I respect people want to make money, but there are other ways, and maybe rethinking this whole thing and maybe having 12-acre farms, because that was the biggest farm my dad ever could afford to own. From the time we were little, we were poor. But he wanted the land. And the line that they left out, one of them, number one, Baker Rock, they're trying to destroy Grand Island, one of the most beautiful gems we have. I go to that park all the time. They want to destroy that farmland. And the other land is these gorgeous wineries on the beautiful land they're on. And my one line they cut out, I loved, it was my funny line. was, well, yeah, maybe that wine's going to be great because you can sit and drink it while you're worried about the cost of veggies that are going up higher and higher. Organic vegetables cost so darn much. Me, who I can't afford a piece of land right now. That's why we're going to move out of the state, so we can afford a piece of land. And was that you might just have to drink a lot of wine to forget about the fact that you can't afford much of anything else that will keep you healthy, like good vegetables, good clean milk, not genetically engineered anything, just good, clean earth. And if you don't believe in climate change, just get your eyes out of wisdom. Wisdom is a word I never hear mentioned anymore, because is it wise to do some things that you had the intelligence and ability and the money and whatever to be able to do it, but is it wise to do it? My dad was so full of wisdom that if you don't believe in global change, just keep watching Mount Hood, because it's trying to tell you. Look at the birds. They're trying to tell you what's going on, folks. So start, get your nose out of your Facebook. Look out, look around, because what's happening, this community is being overrun. It's being overrun. This beautiful place we came to over 20 years ago. Can't believe the traffic. I've probably gone over my time, but I apologize if I'd have read that. It would have been quicker, but I turned around because my dad was kicking my butt saying, look, girl, you go to that meeting because you still owe me. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Barbara Boyer? Is Barbara here?
Yeah.
Oh.
Good morning, Commissioner Sterrett, Commissioners. My name is Barbara Boyer. I am located at 12255 Boyer Road, McMinnville, Oregon. It's an honor and a privilege for me to help my husband's fourth-generation farm carry on its heritage. I am chair of the Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District Board. I chair the I chair the Soil and Water Conservation Commission, and I'm the chair of the State Board of Agriculture. Today I sit before you as the Yamhill Chair, Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District Chair. For the record, I am here as the chair of the Soil and Water Conservation District. The district has submitted written comments on the proposed ordinance change. We support and encourage a change that would lead to the counties placing a high priority on protecting high-value soils and farmland from conversion to solar arrays. The district has commented on individual land use applications and provided recommendation to protect high-value soils and farmlands multiple times. The district believes the county has an obligation to protect high-value soils as stated in Goal Statement 2 of the Yamhill County Comprehensive Plan. Allowing an increased number of solar arrays under the conditional use application process undermines this goal. The county can clarify the importance of protecting high-value soils through a change in ordinance and limit the risk of converting farmland to non-farm uses. So it was brought to our attention as we were reading some of the approvals. One in particular is docket number C-20-16. And it was approved in March of 2017. And it's along Lafayette Highway. And I don't know if you guys have watched one of these be installed, but they do not protect the soil. It is not a pretty sight. And what let's see, what are they calling it? Some of the conditions is they need to write an erosion, sediment, and soil compaction plan. And in here it states, soil compaction on and around the project site will be minimalized during construction. I don't see minimalized here. Compact soils lose innate water carrying and holding capacity, which in turn contributes towards higher runoff volumes, pollutant concentration, and delayed recovery of natural vegetation post-construction. So I would encourage you all to watch one of these be installed, because this is what the ordinance is approving. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Zemina Orego?
Good morning.
Morning.
Chair Chair Starrett, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity once again to provide comments regarding this amendment. As stated previously, we, my husband and I, are completely in favor of this change and ask that you please support it as well. You've heard about the increase in applications, and we really view this now as an emergency. Marion County recently passed a moratorium on industrial solar facilities, and they're no longer accepting any new applications. Just as Marion County has taken important steps to prevent the unnecessary transformation of farmland to industrial uses, passing this amendment is critical for Yamhill County. There have already been numerous applications, you've heard about them, approved on EFU land in Yamhill County, and this is acreage that we will just never recover for farming. As cited previously, and I will re-include it in the record previously, the University of California research from just this current year has shown that these solar installations destroy soil biology for future years. Moreover, the cumulative impacts of the conversion of farmland to these non-farm uses threaten Yamhill County's vibrant agricultural and agritourism economies, as well as our wine industry. In contrast, as Mr. Friedman mentioned, industrial solar arrays bring almost no economic benefit locally, to our local ratepayers. This is something that came up in the Planning Commission hearing. I want to remind you that most, if not all, of these solar projects sell their energy to PGE, Portland General Electric. And by their own account, PGE has already met their renewable energy targets, highlighting once again that there's no need to sacrifice our beautiful and valuable farmland to these industrial uses. I've included the PGE Integrated Resource Plan as part of the record, and it counsels against conversion of farmland for this industrial use. According to this document, and I'm going to quote, the solar photovoltaic capacity standard is a legislative mandate that by January 1st, 2020, PGE must own or contract to purchase 10.9 megawatts of solar PV capacity. PGE's existing portfolio meets the requirements. And this is, stated by them. As part of the record, I also included an article from the Oregonian which reports on this ability to meet the legislative mandate. And I quote again, both PGE and Pacific Corp have been generating more green power than required for years. As a result, they build up huge banks of renewable energy credits that can be used to comply with the state mandates in years when they don't generate enough green power. Utilities successfully lobbied for those long-lived bankable credits as a kind of compliance shock absorber. But PGE's bank of credits is now so big that it can satisfy the increasing mandates until 2029 or 2030 without purchasing any more physical resources. Thus, the solar industry is really only pursuing their own interest in entering into agreements on these agricultural lands to construct an industrial use. And there's really truly no need to rush into that. There are other options that they can pursue. Mr. Friedman showed some good alternatives. So I just want to say that I believe it is critical that you pass this amendment urgently and have it take effect immediately. Solar companies are trying their best to beat your decision to the planning counter by submitting more applications prior to this amendment taking effect. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Kim Hamblin?
Hello, everyone. I feel like I was just here.
You were.
My name is Kim Hamblin, and I have a farm out on 22900 Southwest Pittman Road in Sheridan, Oregon. I am here today in support of the amendment. I have some quick notes. I have a unique perspective as I am a realtor and a farmer, and I utilize agritourism as a means to survive as a farmer. I'm also a big fan of solar, just not on our farmlands. Out in Sheridan, these solar companies are hitting our area hard, soliciting our elderly farmers to lease land at 10 times the rate of leasing for farming. Many of the children are out of state and aren't directly affected by the consequences of these operations on their neighbors and are easily tempted by the high dollars being offered by these solar companies. from a real estate perspective, land is already expensive in our area, and young farmers are being priced out. Investors are actively purchasing property solely just to lease to these solar farms. Meanwhile, our farmers can't afford to buy land to make food and directly impact our local economies. Farmers should have the ability to have us on-farm solar for their own farm use, but that is completely different than a 12-acre solar farm leased to an out-of-state company. We designed our cidery to be able to add solar to our operation, and I am a big fan. Agritourism and the effects of industrial use on our pastoral landscapes makes it hard to survive. You know, if we have industrial landscapes all around us, it's hard to use agritourism to survive as a farm. We need that money to be able to survive. We are apple farmers and are in the process of developing our property for a tasting room for our cider and wine company. I understand the lure of leasing a portion of my land to solar companies and making that money to be able to support ourselves as a farmer. But it's not farming, and I just can't do it. You know, I appreciate farmers, and I know how hard they work, and we all need to pull together to protect these lands. And the pastoral landscapes that we have, I mean, people aren't going to come to tasting rooms out in the middle of nowhere and that are surrounded by industrial landscapes. It's going to ruin these things. We already have a prison that's ruining our landscape right there. And I can't believe how many solar applications are being accepted in the Sheridan area. It kind of breaks my heart because that area is already economically suffering, and there's so many beautiful farms. I was actually the listing agent on the farm on Mill Creek Road, and I saw directly how that impacted their farm. It was this cute little acre, you know, a few acres in the middle of 90 acres of farmland, and that solar company chose to put that solar farm right next to those people's house. They had 90 acres. They could have put it in the far corner and not impacted those people. They chose to put it right there. I mean, they did move it over a titch, but not enough, you know. And now that poor farm, they lost their ability to bring more people out and make a living as a farmer. I think as a minimum, the county should take any farms that are being used for solar farms out of deferral. It's not a farm use that is helping farmers to survive as farming. Deferral isn't meant to be for solar farms. I think also there should be at a minimum a moratorium if this doesn't go through, that we should consider other regulations to help this. Sorry. Oh, and my last thing, as a minimum, I think the county planning departments should send out a notice immediately to all the affected neighbors as soon as those applications are put in, so those neighbors have a chance to fight these companies. It's not fair that they don't know about it for 2 years. Meanwhile, the application's been sitting in the county planning department. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Megan Corbus?
Good morning. My name is Megan Corbus. I live at 6100 Northwest Canyon View Road in Gaston, but I am on the Yamhill County side of that line. I'm surprised to be here today to speak against the ban. It's not what I expected when I got the letter initially, but I was disappointed to see that the approach that the county was considering taking in the face of the threat of solar facilities on farmland was an outright ban. I share a lot of concern about the utilization of our farmland, but I think an outright ban is too extreme for the risk that we face, and I'd like to propose that there might be a third way. There are a lot of alternatives I think the county could consider that are not a complete ban, but could address some of the concerns that we have. And I have read that many other municipalities and areas in the rest of the country, you know, as was referenced, are facing the same question. We could limit the overall acreage. We could make stronger limits on where they're placed next to dwellings. You could require them to plant flowers. You could mandate that removal of them be included in the contract. There's a lot of options, and if making sure that these things happen means that the cost is higher to the county to put these things through the process, we could add a fee to accomplish that. It doesn't have to just be a burden on the county personnel to oversee ensuring that these requirements are enforced. I live near Pike Road outside of Yamhill, and I drive past Bailey Nursery site every day. That's hundreds of gravelled over acres with nursery pots on them. That site is busy. There's a lot of traffic, big trucks, a lot of personnel back and forth. There are more than 5,000 acres of nursery. Now, not all of that is gravelled, but that's a pretty significant portion of Yamhill County that's in nurseries. And I think that it's a little unfair that we're considering banning solar because of our concern about long-term use of those agricultural lands when I'm not hearing a similar conversation about nursery land, which has a similar long-term impact to both neighbors and the soil. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Well, that's it, folks, on the testimony. So at this point, do we want to have input from planning or county council? Where do we go from here?
I'd be happy
Mr. Friday?
to address some things. I've heard a lot about this being an outright ban. It's not an outright ban. It's directing the solar facilities off of Class 1 through 4 soils. It's a decision that the board needs to make as to whether or not that is more in compliance with our comprehensive plan than to allow them. Our comprehensive plan has a statement that we shall preserve Class 1 through 4 soils for farm use, and that's been in our comprehensive plan since the beginning. I do want to note that we have received 6 more solar applications in the last 2 weeks, 3 of them this week. One of the people that testified said that you could not put a solar facility in the floodplain, and one of them actually is just a little bit southwest of Sheridan, and it's in the floodplain. And they will need to make an application for a floodplain development permit, which they have not done. But one of the reasons I provided the new map is we've needed to identify those extra solar facilities that have been applied for, and most of them are around the Sheridan area. I'm not sure why they're around the Sheridan area, but they are. My recommendation is very simple, and that is that I don't think industrial solar scale facilities are dependent on Class 1 through 4 soils, and our farming is. And because of that, and because our comprehensive plan directs us to protect Class 1 through 4 soils, I recommend approval of this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Friday.
And Madam Chair, I would just point out that the ordinance language is the Exhibit A in your packet, and the changes are underlined. We have not prepared an ordinance to have a first reading, so if you adopted an ordinance, we would need to prepare that and have it ready for you in 1 week on May 3rd. The other part of this is that if it's not unanimous, it cannot have an emergency clause, and it would take effect 90 days from the time that it's adopted.
Okay. Well, at this point, yes. Laura?
Do we need to close the public hearing?
Yes. Okay. So we'll close the public hearing at this point. And should I ask for a motion at this point, and then we can have some discussion? All right. So do we have a motion?
I would make a motion that we approve the ordinance as it's been presented by the Planning Department.
We have a motion to approve. Any further discussion? I've got some things I'd like to say.
Well, I do too, but
you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm used to, excuse me for not saying that, because I'm used to discussing before.
Well, we don't do that.
The ordinance, I know, that's what says.
We make a motion,
so
and
you
then we
make,
discuss.
you make yours, and then I.
So why don't you go ahead, and then I will discuss.
You know, as I listened to all the testimony and read through the volumes of information we're given, and I want to thank all the citizens and the vendors and the developers who turned in to me as turned this information in for us to look at. I may look at it a little bit differently from a more of a perspective, serving 8 years as a chairman of the board of a public utility district, McMinnville City Water and Light. I'm a little bit familiar, even though I'm no expert about rate structures, type 1 power, type 2 power. My biggest issue with moving forward and not approving this, to me, is this is all about renewable energy credits. I think, and I can't tell you, I think we had a comment that up through 2029, PGE was meeting their type 2 energy requirements. McMinnville, through their waste management renewable energy project, they are not using that power. Once it's in the grid, we're not using that power locally. That power is actually being sold on the ground. What the biggest buyer right now is Puget Sound Power. So I think this is about protecting for the future for the large utility companies, and I see absolutely no benefit. I don't see rate structures for people, local people. I don't see jobs other than construction, and personally, I do not see any local benefit of allowing on class 1, 2, and 4 cells, allowing renewable energy or allowing solar facilities. One of the questions that I did have, though, that I was waiting for to see if somebody gave an answer. If I remember right, that 12 acres we can produce, and if I call on one of the vendors 3 to 4 megawatts, how much would a 12 at full capacity produce?
2 to 2.5.
2 to 2.5. Does anybody have an idea what Carlton uses on an average day? 1.6. So what happens to that average? That other 9 kilowatts, it's getting sold out it's getting sold out. So I don't believe it's going to be used locally. I think there's technical limitations also. So I guess that's right for right now, all the comments I had, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. A couple of things. This was a tough one, I think, for all of us, because there's so many compelling arguments on both sides. I received in this written testimony from a woman who is an organic farmer on Grand Island, and it was just a very compelling. I would not have expected this kind of a testimony in opposition to the ordinance from an organic farmer who said that they're opposing this ban because this is for her and her family about farmland preservation. And there are certain restrictions that she suggested. Continue to employ the conditional use process, mandate conservation-minded conditions, impose a moratorium on the solar ban installations. We've heard that suggestion too. And I think rather than a knee-jerk reaction and a rush to judgment, that we just perhaps take it a little slow, take a look at some of the things we could do to add more conditions to this instead of an outright ban. She also goes on to say that the EFU land continued to be farmed. And the great point that I got out of this was that orchards are a great model for how you can have secondary crops produced below the canopy of something else. On this particular farm, they manage a 2-acre cherry orchard that is used for pasturing animals as well. It doesn't have to be either or. And another thing is, this is not a condemnation process, because the solar guys can only lease from willing property owners. So if they can only build a few farms in each county because you need a 12 to 18 acre site, where else are you going to find 12 to 18 acre sites in Oregon except on farmland? So if a farmer wants to lease the farmland to a solar farm, and they comply with the state statutory requirements, which we saw, interestingly enough, Senate Bill 101 back in 1975 said that this was an allowable use, actually. So what's wrong with that? The farmer makes some money, gets to hold on to his or her property. We've heard how difficult it is for people to hold on to century farms and the like. Why not give farmers another option so that they can hang on to their farms? And still, we're not seeing, not seeing the destruction of farmland as a result of this. The company makes some money. Profit is not a four-letter word, and the only way we build wealth and build prosperity is by owning property and also by being able to use our property the way it was designed for us to be used. Consumers get another source of electricity. So I think that farmers now have the opportunity to pursue their own interests on their own farms with another option to keep the farm going. A lot of farmers are aging out. A lot of younger farmers have yet to come up and be inspired by this way of life. Let's keep the farmland kind of in abeyance so we can turn around and be able to use it should another generation find interest to this. So I would not be in favor of an outright ban, and I would be more in favor of more restrictions and a moratorium.
I do not see this as an outright ban. I see it as taking a really hard look at the community that we live in, Yamhill County, which is well known for its agricultural advantages. We have wonderful soil here. We have a lot of areas that are considered EFU lands that certainly do not produce the kind of crops that would make it financially viable for planting them. And this is an opportunity for a farmer to take those soils, if they so desire, and rent them for the purpose of a solar farm. But those soils that are truly the lifeblood of Yamhill County, I don't want to see them covered over. And I do not believe, I've not seen any documentation that shows that after we remove these solar panels and that the compaction, the changes in the structure of that soil would be refurbished. I have not seen anything to show me that it's not going to have a long-term negative effect on the ability of that soil to produce. I think that we have to be cognizant of what's taking place. I think a moratorium would be one step, but I think we really need to take a serious look at who we are as a community, and I think this states that we want to remain a firm, strong agricultural community, and there are numerous issues with our land use laws that are causing significant impacts as far as affordable housing and all of that. But that's not what we're here to discuss today. We're talking about keeping our farmland as farmland. And so I made the motion to approve this, and I would call for the question.
Right. We have a motion to approve this ordinance. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Aye. Let the record show that Commissioners Primizic and Olson voted in the affirmative to approve the ordinance, and Commissioner Sterrett voted in the negative. Mr. Friday, did you have anything you wanted to?
We'll be back next week with the written ordinance.
So we'll come back to actually adopt the ordinance next Thursday. Are we here Thursday? You have a dual?
Yes, you are.
formal
You have a
and formal.
combined session.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I can add just one thing, what I would, based on the conversation I think you said, what I would encourage the county to encourage us to do is, once we mention this is over.
Folks, Commissioner Primizic is speaking. If we could just have
No,
some
that's
order.
Commissioner Olson.
Commissioner Olson.
I'm the good-looking one.
Somebody's talking up here.
Anyway, I would suggest that once we pass this, I would suggest very strongly, now that it's been passed, or when we do pass it, that we use the structure Yamhill County used a lot, and we put together a work group task them with citizens and vendors to do certain things and give them a date certain, whether it be 8 months or a year, to come back and make a full report to us and use it as a community, maybe even strategic doing or something like that, where they can come back to us at a later time, because we don't know what's going to happen in a year or 15 months, and we can take another look at it.
Okay. I'm not sure I understood what you were asking.
Basically, what I'm saying is, once this passes, I think we as commissioners and staff, we have a lot more to learn. And what I would like to do is either convene a meeting or in the next 12 to 15 months, put work groups together so we get everybody in the same room talking about, so we all have the same numbers.
So if we've already passed an ordinance based on information that we
And it's
have,
the way that it would
so then putting together a work group after an ordinance is passed seems a little bit backwards.
We may make changes, we might want to tweak that ordinance, or maybe certain things we want to do to that.
I'd want to do that before we passed an ordinance.
Well, that's just my suggestions.
So is your suggestion maybe we could, instead of passing the ordinance, we could wait, have a work group? You don't want to do that? So then after we have the ordinance passed, you want to talk about it?
What I hear Commissioner Olson saying is that he would like, the ordinance has passed, and we will move forward with it in 90 days. I think the question at hand is, will a long-term study show us possibly the need to modify this ordinance that we just passed to some degree that would possibly aid the people who are opposed to this to find a more common ground? I don't know myself, but that's the way I understood the request. One of the things that I am concerned, since we did pass this and we couldn't do it as an emergency, is there any desire at all to put a moratorium until this goes into effect? Is that possible? I don't know if
I think
it's.
Chris, legal staff.
I would.
In effect, you're doing that. I mean, the only way to do it is by an ordinance, and you're not having a unanimous vote. It's going to be a 90-day. It's going to be effective in 90 days. That's all you can do in this case.
So that means that we cannot.
I don't know of any other way to do a moratorium. If you're talking about not allowing them, immediately 90 days from the date that it's adopted, and you were suggesting coming back and looking at it. That's exactly what's going on in Marion County. They banned it, and they, to the same extent that we are, I think, are close. And they're talking about coming back and looking at it later. So it's essentially the same thing.
Okay, but between now and the 90 days this goes into effect, we have to accept more applications, is that correct?
That's correct.
And there's no way to get around that?
If the board adopted the emergency clause, even with the vote as it is, could the board adopt the emergency clause? Is that an option?
No.
Okay.
It has to be unanimous.
All right.
It's ORS 203.045.
Madam Chair, there's a question in the back of the room if you want to take it.
Yes, sir.
I was in the county hearing, and they mentioned the moratorium.
An ordinance passed? They didn't pass an ordinance? They just did it.
What they did was they implemented the moratorium, which I had next week, and established a time period where everyone can come to the table and look at this issue, figure out something better, and come back to the table, and then firm up any sort of ordinance language.
Okay, so they didn't, okay.
We have passed
6-1.
They're following a different process.
So, okay, so they passed a moratorium, and then they're going to pass the ordinance. Okay, all right, so at this point, what we're going to do is next Thursday, come back and actually adopt the ordinance.
Hopefully.
So.
That's the plan.
All right, well, then, at this point, we will resume. Yes.
We're still in session.
Yeah, we'll just resume the formal session and come back and ask if there are any other announcements.
There is one more agenda item, Madam Chair, that didn't get on the add-on list. It is Commissioner Primizic's request regarding the appointment of Jeff Knapp to the Willamette Valley Visitors Association Board to represent the county.
Yes. and I did bring this up at the last minute. As you are aware, I did convene a work group to study our tourism participation, and currently, because we do not have a recognized DMO in Yamhill County, we do not have a seat on the Willamette Valley Visitors Association, and since we are probably, well, not probably, we are the wine center of Oregon's wine industry, and 75% of all the wine grapes grown in Oregon are grown right here in Yamhill County. We don't participate in the revenues generated by those wine license plates. That money goes to Willamette Valley Visitors Association, and we effectively have no seat on it. So I find us woefully underrepresented, and my task force that we're working toward developing a DMO in the interim would like to appoint Jeff to represent us on that board, but they need the county to state that he is their representative, and so that's the purpose of the action.
So, Commissioner, I have some questions about this. I'm wondering if we could bring this back for discussion at our next informal, which would be next Thursday.
Well, we need to get this notice because they're going to be having their next meeting, and I want representation.
I think it's important that if the chair has some questions that we be able to bring it back and answer.
Well,
those
I didn't.
questions.
In other words, it was late coming to us. There were a lot of questions we're not allowed to. We haven't been able to actually have a discussion because it's something we're going to be voting on. So I'm just wondering if I could submit those questions to our administrator to get the answers so that the rest of the board has the answers to the questions that. The information that you might have that we don't have, and then we can discuss at informal so that we can at least know what we're voting on, because it seems kind of like I have a couple of questions.
Okay. I'd be happy to answer your questions if I could. I mean,
I'm just wondering,
no problem.
Commissioner, has Jeff been going to, I know he has been officially saying this, but he been going to those meetings anyway, do you know?
He has not. We do not have a seat, but
I know we don't have a seat.
right, and he has gone to some of those meetings from the standpoint of hearing what's going on, but there's a number of activities taking place that we're not privy to, and we need to be at the table. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. It's that simple.
So next year,
is that okay? I mean, are we? Is there anything going to happen between now and Thursday that we can't at least get the info and have a discussion on Thursday? Okay?
I'm fine with that.
You mean Tuesday?
Thursday.
Thursday.
We don't
Next
have
Thursday. Okay. No, you give me your questions. I'll get your answers, and we'll get this thing moving forward. I know you don't. You don't want to talk to me.
I'll talk to you, but not about this. We're not allowed to do that. All right, so I'll submit them to Laura, and then we can discuss it next Thursday. So if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we'll close today's formal session. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate your time.